Hello everyone, welcome to a new module. In this module, we learn some analytics. So we will do the scatter chart and the forecast. So we start with the scatter first. I'll make a new sheet. Let's call this my scatter. Now the scatter can have two variables in it. So I'll keep my profit and the sales. So double click on both of them. The profit comes in the rows, which is the y-axis, and the sales in the columns, which is the x-axis. Now, right now, they are aggregated. That means it's showing us the sum of the profit and the sum of the sales as well. What we would like to do is to keep the market and keep this in the label. Now, this means it breaks that into 5 of them. So now it's showing me the sum of sales and the sum of profit for all the 5 markets separately, like this. We can keep a third variable as well. So I can keep my sales in the size as well. So now the size changes and is representative of the sales value, as you can see here. Looks very nice. Now that is the basic scatter chart that we create. I'm going to make a duplicate and show you how we can do some analytics on top of it. So I'll remove the market, remove the size, reduce the size a little bit, and I will keep my customer name. Now remember, we have 796 customers with us. And how do I confirm that? In the bottom left corner, it tells me we have 796 marks. So we have 796 customers. Now imagine that you want to take some action on the basis of the customer cohorts. So I want to understand that a campaign that I'm running, or a discount that I want to offer, or an initiative that I want to take, what cohort of customers should I run it for? So I want to understand how many of these are homogeneous. That means they form one cluster. To do this, I go to Analytics, we select cluster and we drag it inside. And you notice it creates 2 clusters for us. Let's do that one more time. So if I select my cluster and I drag it inside, it creates these 2 clusters for me. This one. Now, if I go to edit clusters, we can also choose the number of clusters that we want. So maybe I want 5 of them. And now you notice it creates 5 clusters like this. Now think about it. Just by looking at this, anybody would assume that cluster number 5, which are high sales and high profit, are probably the most important customers for the company. But that's not entirely true, right? Because while their profit margin would be very high, there aren't that many of them. That cluster is very small. On the other hand, cluster 1 is very dense, cluster 2 is also quite dense. And clearly, cluster 2 and cluster 3 both have customers who are below the 0 line. So what we want to do now is to drag my clusters, which is coming automatically in the colors, back into the table. Usually we do it the other way around. We select a field from the table and put it in the marks. Now I want to do the opposite. So I want to drag it back into the tables. It's called customer name clusters. And now if I right click, I can also edit the group. And if you want to rename it, you can. I'm not doing it right now, but you can call it high sales, high profit, high sales, low profit, etc. How does that help us? Because now I can go and I can select another sheet and I can call this cluster analysis. And in this, I want to keep my clusters, my sales, and my profit. And this gives us a very interesting picture. So it tells us that in terms of top line, cluster 1 is the highest at 4.4 million and profit is 646,000. So if you look, cluster 1, who might not seem necessarily to be the best customers as a cohort, that is where the real money is, right? Higher on sales, higher on profit. And if you look at cluster 5, which seems very exciting, sure, cluster 5 profit is quite high, but it's not really contributing that much to the business. Because if you think about it, we do have cluster 1 and cluster 4 that are higher, much, much higher. And cluster 4 is also contributing as a cohort pretty significantly. So if you look at cluster 4, Again, the importance in terms of profitability, in terms of absolute numbers, is much higher than cluster 5. Of course, later when we learn how to calculate the profit margin, you will also see how that brings another layer of analysis to this. What if you want to see how many customers fall in these clusters? So I can put my customer name and I can keep it in the measure values, but that doesn't work. So I'll drag it into on top of the 2 columns. Now take a minute and understand what is happening. We have our customer name, but that's a dimension. So I want to change that. And let's see how we can make this into a measure. So let me do that one more time. So customer name should become a measure, which is the distinct count. And now this can be dragged back into the measure values. And with this little bit of effort, we are now able to get the profit and the sales and the distinct count of customers. So the total we know, if I enable the totals as well, is 796 unique customers. And we can see what is the spread, how many customers fall in each one of the clusters. Now, in terms of extra reading, I would strongly suggest that you read about Tableau clusters on the official website to understand how it works. It might not be necessary because for most business cases, simply creating the cluster gives a good enough idea. But if you really want to go deeper, and you can go through it. And the other bit of reading I would like you to do is to read about k-means versus KNA. So these are 2 very common methods of machine learning. One is a supervised, the other is an unsupervised machine learning technique. The one we use in Tableau is k-means, but I think this is the basic form of machine learning that everybody should have a little bit of idea about. Coming back to the clusters, if I come back to the first one, you can also see that I can have slicers in it as well. So let's say I make one more duplicate and I want to remove the clusters from here. So I can keep my sales as a filter and my profit as a filter. And you can see here that I can actually move this. And this gives me a great way of analyzing the data and narrowing down to the customers where we want to focus on.